Welcome back everyone, Professor Cameron here. Now in our last few videos, what we've done is we've gone ahead and modeled the part and then created our part drawing based on that part. What we're going to do this week is we're going to run through the process of creating an assembly and an assembly drawing. Now the assembly drawings we're going to touch on in the next video in this. This video, what we're going to do is just put this assembly together, go over some tips and tricks, and then get this set up for actually creating our assembly drawing. And to do that, we're going to put in what we call an exploded view, which we talked about in our last video. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through, put this assembly together, and then in our next video, we'll actually go through the process of creating that assembly drawing. So what we're going to do is, on Blackboard, I'm going to supply all of these parts for you guys. So all you have to do is download them, and then we can go ahead and put this assembly together. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a new assembly file. It's going to give us our blank workspace. And what it's going to ask us to do is to insert our first component into this assembly. There's really no hard and fast rule as to what your first component should be. The way I like to think about it is, imagine you have all your parts laid out on your desk. The first component that you insert should be the first piece that you pick up off your desk and start attaching other parts to. Like I said, there's no hard and fast rule. It just works a little bit easier for me. So that's what I recommend. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Browse. We're going to scroll to the folder where we have all of our parts saved. And we are going to open up the piece called, let's see, where is it? Parts. Base plate. It should look like this guy here. So we're going to go ahead and just set this down anywhere in our workspace. Now some people like to bring in all of the other components at the same time. I like to sort of bring them in one level at a time, just so my workspace doesn't get too cluttered. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Assembly, Insert Component. It's going to bring us right back to that window we were just at. We're going to go to Browse, and we're going to open up this piece here. It's called the bearing. Now, anytime we have a part that mates with screw holes, or that attaches with screw holes, we want to mate it using those features. That way, if the part is modeled improperly, the screw holes are misaligned, it won't actually fit together in the assembly. And that way we can fix the part before we actually have the parts made. It's sort of a check process for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by selecting our mate tool. It looks like a paperclip. We're going to select this top surface of our base, and we're going to select the bottom surface of the bearing, and we're going to click OK. Now all that's going to do is just put this bearing on the same level as the base. A lot of times if you have your part slightly angled and you're dragging it around, it might not look like it's sitting on the base. That's just an optical illusion. If you put your part in a perfect side view, you'll see it can't leave that base. It's stuck on there. So like I was talking about earlier, what we're going to do now is align this up using the screw holes. To do that, we're going to mate this curved surface here to this curved surface here in our base. Make sure you select the surface when you do this and not the edge. It can give you an issue if you select the edges, so make sure you're selecting a surface, but otherwise the process is the same. You're going to select this surface here and this surface here. Now, the mate tool, it's pretty intuitive. It typically knows what you want to mate and how it wants to mate it. In another video, we're going to cover the different types of mates and how they're used. but for 99% of your mating, just leaving it to the default settings will be fine. So we can go ahead and select OK on that. Now what we've done is we've mated this with just one location mate, meaning this is still free to pivot around. So what we're going to do is we're going to do that same mate that we just did with this other screw hole. So we're going to go to our mate tool, and select those two surfaces. And if the part is made properly, it will just rotate into alignment. If it doesn't, that means there's an issue with the part and the hole spacing. So that's something you want to pay attention to. And we can select OK. Now in your model, you'll notice this bearing has a hole in it. It doesn't matter which side that hole is on. It could be the left side, it could be the right side. So once we have that in, what we're going to do is we're going to put in the screws that hold this in place. We're going to go to Insert Component, and we are going to open up this screw. This guy right here. Now, we're going to need two of these. And what we could do is go to Insert Components, Browse, and bring in another screw. Or, the quick way is to press and hold Control on your keyboard, click, and then drag out a second one. And you can drag out hundreds of these if you need to. It's a really quick way to bring in multiple parts. Alright, so we're going to deal with one screw at a time. And we're going to mate this actually very similar to how we just mated the bearing. What we're going to do is we're going to select the underside of the screw head right here. And we're going to mate that to this surface here in the bearing. So we can mate that. And we can select OK. And then to get this to sit inside that screw hole, we're going to mate that curved inside surface to the cylinder of the screw hole. Now when we do this, what we're going to do is we're going to select lock rotation. What that's going to do is it's going to prevent this screw from spinning. And I will leave the second screw unlocked just as a demonstration to show you what effect that has. Truth be told, it's not a huge issue for us. But it is something we want to pay attention to. So what we're going to do is we're going to do that same mate to the other screw. And then we're going to do the screw hole to the shaft. Now at this point, you guys should lock your rotation here. And the reason I didn't is to show you the effect this has. So right now we've got our assembly, and it should be fully defined. However, mine is not. Mine's underdefined because I didn't lock the rotation on this screw head. And the only effect that has for us is my screw can pivot around in there. Now realistically, that's not a huge issue. However, when you're working on assemblies, chances are you're working on them with multiple people. Now when somebody opens this assembly up for the first time, they're going to check and see if it's fully defined or underdefined. If it's underdefined, they have to go through all of the mates and figure out why. If it's fully defined, they can start working with it right away. Now, we just have 4 pieces here, but we already have a handful of mates. If you're working on a 300-piece assembly, which is not uncommon, you're going to have a list of mates a mile long, and it's going to be a pain to check through all of those. So this is why we just want to, practice good technique when we're modeling. Should you find yourself in the situation that I am, what you're going to do is you're going to look at your mates here, and this concentric mate here on the bottom. See how we have 2 of them? Concentric and concentric. This is the locked one. This is the unlocked one. If your bullseye here has a white open center, it's unlocked. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on that and choose lock rotation. These first 2, these are going to stay unlocked, and even if I try to lock them, it won't do it. The reason is we mated this bearing here with 3 points of contact. 1, 2, and then the bottom. The screws are mated with only 2, which is why those screws can spin and the bearing cannot. So just to explain the difference between those. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and go to Insert Components, Browse, and we're going to insert the collar. This guy right here. And essentially we're going to mate this like a big screw. We're going to mate the underside of the head here to the top of the bearing. And then we're going to mate this surface here, this cylindrical ring, to this surface here. And just like we did with the screw, we want to lock rotation. So this is all put together now. And this looks pretty good. We should be happy with this. So once we're at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and save this assembly. To get ready for our drawing, what we're going to do is we're going to put this into an exploded state. So once we've got this built, we've got it saved, what we can do is we can select Exploded View. And the Exploded View just takes your assembly and blows it apart so you can see how all the pieces fit together. We're going to select Exploded View. And then all we do here is to select a component, and it will give you this triad. And you can move this component. And what you want to do is move the components as little as possible. Here, it's fighting with me. You want to move the components as little as possible to show this part blown apart. So something kind of like this would be sufficient. So this looks good. You can clearly see all the individual components. You can see roughly how they all fit together. And this looks good. So what we can do is we can go ahead and select OK. And that's going to leave it in this exploded state. Now, we didn't actually get rid of any of our mates. And our model is still fully defined. This is just an alternate view that we're looking at. To collapse this back into its compressed, put together state, what we're going to do is we're going to come to Configurations Manager. We're going to expand this default tree, and we see Exploded View here. We can right-click on this and select Collapse or Explode. And that's going to show it in the 2 states. Now this is going to be helpful for us when we go ahead and create our drawing in the next video. But for now, you guys can go ahead and save this assembly. If you guys have any questions on this, please let me know. And as always, have a nice day.